The Royal Canadian Police, in fact, has arrested 3 Indian nationals in connection with the death of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. They have been identified as Karan Brar, Preet Singh and Preet Singh. These arrests follow allegations made by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau against India. He claimed that India was behind the killing of Nijjar on Canadian soil. India-Canada ties have been at an all-time low for months now due to these unsolicited comments. These arrests come as Trudeau administration ramps up pressure on India again. Yet Canada has remained silent on what took place in the 1980s, the Kanishka bombings and the perpetrators that walked free and were never accounted for. The timing of these arrests is also very suspicious as India is in the middle of its election cycle. This prompts us to ask, what does Trudeau wish to accomplish by this kind of a tirade? We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee, former diplomat, Major General Dhruv Katoch, defense expert, Director of India Foundation, also with us on the show. Mr. Surinder Singh Lali, international affairs expert, also joins us on the program. Ambassador Mukherjee, I'll begin with you, ma'am. Ma'am, first up, these allegations that are being made, they are not only uncalled for, they are unsolicited and they are unsubstantiated. In fact, one of the people who's been arrested, his family is shocked that their son, who does not have any criminal background, would be embroiled in something like this. And this all seems to be very, very fishy. Are these people also being used as scapegoats? And without even mentioning any evidence, ma'am, they continue to say that we are trying to establish an Indian connection after arresting these people. How tarnishing is that? And what kind of a response should India be, in fact, be working on right now?
Well, first of all, Vineet, as you said, it takes the Indo-Canadian relationship to a new low. Coming in the middle of a national election, as you rightly point out, would give rise to suspicion that there are people working hard both in Canada and in other countries and within India to try to influence the outcome of the election. What they do not understand is that in such a vast country like India, such news actually really doesn't matter, because what the people of India focus on is development, because, and I don't think it would influence the outcome at all in the election. But the issue here is that we have repeatedly said that these killings of terrorists outside Indian soil, on the soil of other countries, are due to gang wars of gangs who are either outside, who've been given political exile, or who are there in the guise of students, and they are working at the behest of gangs who are either working outside India or inside India. In this case, there are reports that they could be linked to the Lawrence Bishnoi gang. They could be having links to the Pakistani ISI, because the question also arose that if indeed it was the Indian government that ordered their killings, then after killing, why did they not return to India? It's clearly because they are not doing it at the behest of any official in the Indian government. They are doing it because of orders, if indeed they are not innocent, by orders from some gang, and their loyalties lie elsewhere. There are also reports that they were not students, that they had never joined a university, they had never applied for work. So clearly there would be a connection which would be either to the ISI or to gangs operating in India or outside India. And for the Canadians to rush to such a conclusion, to try to pin it on government of India, on senior ranking officials, on officials in the RANAW, without any evidence, without showing any evidence, is absolutely reprehensible. And as you rightly point out, when we gave them so much of evidence about the Kanishka bombing, they did nothing and let the killers go loose. So it's not just double standards. I think, Vineet, in my perspective, it is time for us to reciprocate, to recall our High Commissioners, to ask them to recall their High Commissioner, and to make it clear that this is not business as usual. We must downgrade our relationship like we did with Pakistan. This is not acceptable. They cannot treat us like a banana republic, and we will not accept it. That is That would be my advice to the Indian government through your channel, Vineet.
Katoch. Well, first of all, no shred of evidence has been produced that the Indian government is linked to these killings. And secondly, what about the political space that separatism and enemies of India are getting in Canada? What about what they did in the 80s? It was a walkover when it came to closing the Kanishka crash investigations, and Canada till date does not hold anybody accountable for what happened there. Hundreds of Indians were lost their lives.
Thank you, Vineet. Vineet, I think it's a very strange way, a strange manner of functioning as far as the Canadian government is concerned. Now, they know very well Indian sensitivities on certain issues, yet they have not bothered about those sensitivities, and they continue to harbor those people who are bent on creating trouble within India. But that notwithstanding, when we look at the present case, two things stand out very clearly. One, the killing which has taken place and the three people arrested are all young men. None of them are employed in any worthwhile employment, and they have been brought there for specific purposes by people who are already Indian-born people who are Canadian citizens but who are settled now in Canada for their own purposes. Now, obviously, there will be feuding going on between various parties within Canada, and it is not something which is new. If you look at what happened in Punjab, say 40, 50 years ago, these feuds are very common. You have two groups fighting, and they will continue fighting till such time as some senses delve into each. So here there is a particular battle going on for control of the Sikh Gurdwaras, for control of the Sikh community. And in my opinion, I think all these killings are related towards that end. I'm quite certain that the Canadian government is aware of that fact. So being aware of that fact, and despite that, just putting an accusatory finger at the Indian intelligence agencies and the Indian government to having promoted this killing, I think is totally unacceptable. The ambassador has very clearly stated that it is time we downgrade our relations with Canada. I think that would be a very appropriate first step. We have to send them a message. They cannot continue to think that they are a superior lot of people and that India is still a country whom they rule over. Those days are over. So a strong messaging has to go. And in my view, I don't think the Indian government should accept anything as far as the Canadians are concerned. Vineet.
Mr. Lali, how do you look at this? There are several MOUs that have been signed between India and Canada when it comes to extradition, when it comes to cooperation, when it comes to economy. India and Canada are the 10th largest trading partner. They were in 2022. We are not aware of the official figures as they stand today. But once again, it boils down to the fact that, even if there are problems that they have with the Indian government, should they be made open in an undiplomatic way, which ends up straining ties with both the countries? There are over 100,000 students who are in Canada at this point in time. About 2 million Indians, 4% of the Canadian population is Indian. So that means a chunk of their economy, their GDP, is also flowing through these contributions and this, kind of a diaspora presence. Why would they want to risk it all? What's in it for Justin Trudeau? Obviously, his opponents and the opposition in the parliament has slammed Justin Trudeau for single-handedly, demolishing the wonderful ties that we had with Canada.
Thank you, Vineet. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be here. And Vineet, my late father, God bless his soul, had something very interesting to say. Loosely translated into English, it means that it's much better to have an intelligent enemy than to have a foolish friend. That's Justin Trudeau for me. It took them 229 days to catch 3 people who have been operating on their soil. I mean, if this is an intelligence job, I think he needs to understand the 101 that in such jobs, not that I'm in any way qualified to comment on this, but common sense tells me that they're not going to stick around on the same soil for 229 days to be there. Number 2, they had tourist visa and student visa. Now, who gave them the visas? Whose part of the brief was it to do their due diligence and check then and give visas to them? Number 3, they entered in 2021. So what is the Canadian intelligence doing they have been in the country since 2021 and not attending college, and in a tourist visa, it doesn't, normally they don't allow you to stay for more than 60 days, and you're not allowed to work either. So what were these Johnnies doing since 2021 on Canadian soil? I mean, what was the Canadian intelligence or the RCMP doing? Maybe, enjoying their coffee and donuts, as they say in Canada. And who do they allege to kill? Nijjar. I mean, what is that man's credential? He was wanted in India. He's been to Pakistan. He entered Canada under the last name of Sharma, and then from a plumber. I wonder how great a plumber he was. He ends up becoming the president of one of the largest gurdwaras in Surrey. Not to mention, this man is also, there are videos of him circulating, using assault AK-47, banned weapons in Canada. So, and he openly also talks about the balkanization of India. So what has the Canadian intelligence been up to? I feel this is part of a syndicate which are involved in gangland wars. And there is no hidden secret that there has to be ISI support. And very often do we not read in the paper about the immigration frauds and the drug frauds that are happening in Canada, because a lot of Punjabis control the trucking business too. So that itself becomes a big fig leaf for them to transport illegal counterfeit things from America to Canada and vice versa. There are two CIS directors I was watching this morning, and Richard Fadden and Ward Alcock. And both of them are on record in the last 24 hours saying that they feel they've misjudged, because this kind of a job, sticking around for the next 221 days is not something which the intelligence does. Maybe it is part of, the gangland wars that it took place. So your question, what you started the show, was what it is. I think this is a failed attempt by Justin Trudeau to hide his failure as an administrator. And the other thing which I think he's trying very hard to do is also shift the focus from China, because the way China has been meddling in their elections, the way China has been virtually making police stations in their country. I mean, even the Justice Mary Georgia report speaks about it. So I think it's a failed attempt by Justin Trudeau, which is kind of thus far fallen flat on his face. Thank you.
All right. Good points, Mr. Lally. Ambassador Mukherjee, India has still been trying to be diplomatic. We haven't had a knee-jerk reaction, despite knowing that the problems with these Khalistani elements have resulted in the death of a prime minister, of a chief minister, and has, on several occasions resulted in, a lot of security concerns within the country. And of course, I also spoke about the Kanishka crash and how, a lopsided investigation into that whole event led to families of the dead bereaved for a lifetime. But at the same time, Justin Trudeau, being the Prime Minister, doesn't seem to be watching what he says. How is that supposed to be a newfound concern for India? Mr. Bakshi has time and again said that no shred of evidence has been given, but it's only lip service that has kept the Canadian government going.
Well, frankly, Vineet, if Justin Trudeau suffers from what we call foot-and-mouth disease, that's a Canadian problem. That's not an Indian problem. As far as we are concerned, as a mature democracy, in the middle of one of the biggest elections globally, where 1 billion people are going to vote, such accusations I would term as an attempted interference in our internal affairs and trying to influence the outcome of the elections. Secondly, without any shred of evidence, to try to shift the blame, I would tend to agree that Mr. Trudeau is trying to divert domestic attention from the Chinese interference in their internal affairs to this issue on one hand, and I would add that trying to rally that 1% of the 2% Sikh vote in Canada, because of the 2% Sikh vote, not all of them support Khalistan. So out of the 2%, I would say less than 1% support Khalistan. He is trying to rally that less than 1%, which apparently would get him seats in one or two key constituencies to prop up his government, and maybe he hopes for a re-election, which looks very unlikely. Under those circumstances, we should definitely not have a knee-jerk reaction. That is not the way a mature democracy reacts. We should go in for a serious consideration of downgrading the relationship, because this is not the way that two democracies can function with daily accusations. We are both members of the Commonwealth. We have a long history of cooperation. We have a huge Indian diaspora. If this is the way Mr. Trudeau thinks that he is going to pander to his tiny little khalistani, less than 1% of the Sikh population constituency, to swing votes maybe here or there, that is a Canadian problem. But it becomes an Indian problem when he tries to use it to manipulate our change or interfere in our election results. Which is why I'm saying that the time has come for us to recall our High Commissioner, to tell them to recall their High Commissioner, and to go look at a serious downgrade of the relationship, because it is clear that with such a Prime Minister at the helm of affairs, the relationship can only go further down, it cannot go up. And this is irrespective of the outcome of our elections, because any mature democracy, regardless of who wins the election or who loses the election, is not going to allow such accusations to come up from time to time, and which casts a shadow on the international global profile of India, which has just given up its G20 presidency, and which seems to give the impression that we are some kind of a rogue state, forgetting that when it was the West, they think that they have the sovereign right to go into the territories of other countries and take down whom they term as terrorists. But the same right is denied to others. That is the subject matter of another debate. But again, it speaks of double standards, that when they do this for themselves, nobody says a thing, not even developing countries, because the international order is still not equal. But when it comes of going after India because you don't like the government in power or you don't like the Prime Minister in power, you use these kind of mischievous and unfounded allegations to try to influence public opinion in Canada and in India. And that is not acceptable, which is why I began the debate by saying it's time for us to look at a serious downgrade of the relationship. Vineet.
Absolutely. And General Katoch, in fact, the local media in Canada also goes on to say that, Khalistani terrorism, sir, has flourished under the Trudeau regime. And even the language that has been used by Mr. Trudeau's government is that of an adversary. This is how India and Pakistan, in fact, this is how Pakistan talks to us. There is no animosity to begin with. Is this deeply rooted into the political insecurities of the current regime in Canada? General Katoch?
Vineet, yes, I think the present regime in Canada does. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I do think that the present regime, the Trudeau regime, has got certain issues with respect to their own re-election, the elections which are going to take place, I think, in October next year. So they have their own challenges. But I think there is something which goes fundamentally even deeper than that. It is a question of leverage, and the West, the US, Canada, I will say, is, are really playing an American card most of the time, and certain countries in Western Europe, they like to influence India's foreign policy. And two tools they use to influence India's foreign policy as leverages. One is by hosting anti-India elements. Now you see, where are these anti-India elements held? When you look at the Khalistani lot, by and large it's in Canada, a very large percentage in the UK, some in Germany. And then the other part of it is talking to India on human rights. And both these issues they whip up continuously whenever they feel like, when they want to influence India's foreign policy, and they want India to act on the world stage in a particular manner which suits their political narrative. Now, what has happened really is that in the last 10 years, the government of India has said no, very, very specifically to these things. And that has made them very uncomfortable. Not just that. You see, the government stands on various issues, be it Pakistan, be it China, or be it this leverage which these Western countries are trying to impose on India. The political establishment has been very firm, and our diplomats have held that stance very ably across all countries. Now, I think that for them is a cause of concern because India is no longer playing the game they want to play in their manner. India is playing the game in our own way, and the Indian game now is very firmly rooted to support India's interests. For some reason, the Canadians still think that India should support Canadian interests, which I really haven't understood, Justin Trudeau is going to be on the way out, but he's still got some time to go. And I think the Indian government has to take a very strong stance as far as Canada is concerned and tell them, we've had enough of you. It is very good that when the G20 summit took place in India, Canada was virtually ignored. That is a factual. In fact, they deserve to be ignored even more. And if they're so concerned about China and trying to vent off their anger against India, I think they're barking up the wrong tree. India has done nothing to hurt Canadian self-interest, whereas China has. If they wish to sort of equalize the problem, I think they should go after China and sort it out. Vineet.
All right. Mr. Lali, picture this. This is what has happened under the watch of Prime Minister Trudeau. Khalistani parades have had, floats depicting the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in a celebratory fashion. They were allowed under Mr. Justin Trudeau's regime. Secondly, some Hindu temples and the Indian embassy was defaced. It was allowed under this administration. Thirdly, there was a genocidal call against Hindus from Canada, which was in fact made quite public, and it was allowed under this regime. And they have a problem with India?
Thank you, Vineet. And let me be on record that on my last trip to Canada, I was made to leave a Gurdwara Sahib because this was 6 months ago, because I protested on having the picture of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale next to Guru Nanak. I don't regret leaving the Gurdwara because I don't have to, the pig enjoys it and I don't wish to fight the pig. But, to me, Vineet, this seems like a game of billiards. Now, you'd be surprised at what does billiards to do with this. In billiards, you hit one ball, it hits the other ball, and the third one goes in. Who's going to control America? General Trudeau said that they're trying to influence, lack of a better word, trying to control India, influence India. It's not Canada, maybe it's the United States. Because they've been trying very hard to make India an ally, which we have resisted for obvious reasons. Because, we don't want to. We have our interest, our middle class. We'll buy the LS-400s where we need to buy to. We'll keep our relations with Iran independent of what the diktat we're going to get for people who divided and polarized the world, during the Cold Wars and now want us to fight their enemies. We don't want to do that.
Okay.
So maybe Mr. Justin Trudeau is a little fig leaf, or he's a proxy boy for the United States to make such complications for India so that they can try and negotiate more with us. Because, there is no rocket science that now to counter China, America needs India in the Indo-Pacific. So maybe this is a larger strategy. But there is somebody else behind the show, and Justin Trudeau is too stupid enough to realize that what's going on. Or maybe he's a party to it and wants to become the American tool, because I remember when I used to live in the US, they used to call America as Canada's backyard. So how much say does the backyard gardener have when it comes to the owner of the house?
All right. Mr. Lali, appreciate those comments. Ambassador Mukherjee, General Katoch, thank you so much for being a part of this incisive conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.